Hello and welcome to the second class presented by the kinesiology team of Alberta Kidney Care North. Today's class is called Fit for Life, and you will soon learn what that F-I-T-T in FIT stands for. Just like last time, just one item for housekeeping. If your question is not answered during today's session, or if you have a question that doesn't get answered as the presentation goes on, feel free to copy down this email right here, and you can send an email to us, the kinesiology team, and we will help you as soon as we can. Again, to review your kinesiology team, we have Ivana, myself, Kylie, Christina, and Maria. We all represent different areas in the program of Alberta Kidney Care North. And that email I showed you on the last slide does get sent to all of us. So the appropriate person or your representative will likely be the one who gets back to you, but you might hear from a combination of us throughout your time in the program. Today's learning objectives are, upon completion of the presentation, you will or you should be able to identify what F-I-T-T or FIT stands for. You should be able to create an exercise routine using the FIT principle, which we will review. You'll be able to list 1, 2, or maybe 3 strategies to exercise safely, and you will be able to make a SMART goal. Just to quickly review what we went over in the last presentation, the benefits of exercise, remember that there are both health and fitness benefits of exercise. So the health benefits are those that you can't really see but are really crucial and important to, well, our health. Examples include decreasing your risk of getting another or a new chronic disease, blood pressure, blood glucose control, improved mental health, those types of things that we can't really see. Sometimes we can feel, but not so much compared to the fitness benefits. These are the types of benefits where we can feel and experience them. So this is getting stronger, improving our endurance, or our ability to do activities for a long time, making daily activities easier because of our gained strength and endurance and those types of things. So just remember those two sides, and I could go on and on about the benefits of exercise or physical activity, but I'll stop right there. The FIT principle is something us kinesiologists or exercise specialists use to help us prescribe or organize or structure a client's exercise or physical activity. So we have F-I-T-T, which stands for frequency, intensity, time, and type of activity. So for the F, frequency, this is talking about how often should you exercise or do physical activity. Now the goal is to do some type of movement every day, and you may remember this from the last presentation where we talked about making your day harder and finding any activity, whether that be a structured exercise session or more of a less structured daily physical activity, just finding something to get your body moving every day. Now, if we're specifically talking about exercise, that's structured movement, we do recommend gradually working up to most days of the week, which would be 4 or more days per week. However, that might mean you start with 1 day a week. That might mean you start with just high energy days. You do some structured exercise. But Canadian guidelines would say 4 or more days per week if that's something that you're wanting to work towards. The next component of the FIT principle is intensity, or the I. And intensity is talking about how difficult or how easy or intense, I guess, the activity or the exercise is. When it comes to measuring or gauging our intensity, we tend to encourage that you just go by how it feels. So does it feel easy or does it feel difficult or does it feel somewhere in between? So we use a scale called the RPE scale, or the Rating of Perceived Exertion scale. This is that 6 to 20 scale you can see up here on the PowerPoint. And we actually recommend that you aim for an 11 to 13, or maybe even a 10 to 13, I would recommend a lot of the time. So this is where exercise or activities feel fairly light to somewhat hard. Another way to measure this would be the talk test. So if you were to do an activity, let's say go for a walk with a friend, to know that you're in an appropriate intensity level, you should be able to say about a complete sentence, maybe two at a time, without needing to take that breath. If the activity is really easy, you could be able to talk for maybe a minute or two or longer without an issue or without needing to take that breath. And if you're working too hard, it might sound kind of like this, where you have to take a breath every couple words. We don't recommend you go into that difficult level. And you might also think about, depending on the activity that you're doing, you actually don't want to aim for this moderate 10 to 13 zone. For example, if you're going grocery shopping, the goal is to be able to get your entire grocery shop completed without really needing to rest. So you might actually either not even focus on how hard you're working, but you're probably going to want to be somewhere in the yellow zone around a 7, 8, or 9 so that you can do that activity for a longer period of time. Whereas if you're engaging in an exercise class, going for a walk, maybe using an exercise bike, that's when we'd want you to focus on how easy or difficult the exercise is. And that's when we want you to aim for that 10, 11, 12, or 13, or that talk test of a moderate effort. Up next is our first T in the FIT principle, and this stands for time, or how long of an exercise or activity session should you aim for. There are actually two ways to look at time. One would be how long should each singular exercise session be, and the other way to look at time would be how much exercise are you accumulating in 1 week. So I'm going to start with just per session. Now, the end goal would be about 20 to 60 minutes per exercise or per structured movement session. However, remember, one size does not fit all, and you should always start with what you're comfortable with and what you think your limit or your tolerance level is. I would say a lot of the time I get my clients to start with 10 minutes if they haven't been active in recent weeks, months, or years. So what that might look like is starting with 10 minutes of walking or whatever activity you choose in your first week, and then going back to the frequency, aiming to do that a few times per week. And again, you might start with only once or twice a week. You start with wherever you're comfortable. But just for the sake of this example, week 1, you might do 10 minutes of walking 3 times per week. Week 2, you just make a small change by adding 2 minutes per session and keeping your frequency the same. Then week 3, add another 2 to 3 minutes, and same with week 4. Um, you might find that adding 2 minutes was too easy, so then you could add 5 minutes. But I don't really recommend making drastic changes. I think 5, maybe 10-minute changes maximum is reasonable. It's always best to increase your durations gradually instead of making too big of a change too soon. Now, when it comes to that volume I was talking about, or the weekly amount, the end goal, what research shows, is a good duration to aim for in order to have health and fitness benefits, is 150 minutes of exercise per week. Now, that number can sound really daunting, and that's why I mentioned it second. I think it's best to start with whatever duration works for you. Start with once, twice, maybe 3 times per week, and then gradually increase your duration and maybe even increase your frequency as well. All right, and the last T in the FIT principle, or the last component of the FIT principle, is type. So what type of activity or exercise are you choosing to do? One of the most common questions I receive as an exercise specialist is, what is the best activity? I find it's it's kind of in our society to always be looking for what's the newest, the best activity that a person can do to get the best bang for their buck or their most health and fitness benefits from a certain activity. And honestly, I say the same answer every time. The best activity, the best kind of exercise is the kind that you can do, that you will do, and most importantly, it's the kind that you enjoy. Walking may be best for you because you enjoy it or because you have access to long hallways in the winter or a great walkable area in the summer. But for some people, walking just isn't an option, and that's okay. So it's about finding what works for you. Keep in mind that you don't have to do a structured exercise too. Sometimes you just need to do some activities, which requires a lot of activities. So you'll see in the pictures we have people doing yard work and vacuuming or housework. Make sure that you keep some variety in your activity. I think that's probably my number one piece of advice when it comes to type is how variant can you make your activity or exercise? Because the more ideas, the more types of things you do, the less likely you are to get bored. But also, the more we change things up, the more our body needs to continue to respond and adapt to the type of activity that you're doing. So that might mean doing housework one day, an exercise class the next day, a walk with a friend the next day, and so on and so on. If you don't have access to a lot of types of activities, there's ways to make everything a little bit variant too. I'll take walking for example again. Maybe one day you walk alone, maybe one day you walk on a treadmill, maybe one day you walk outdoors, one day you walk in a mall. One day you go for a short, fast walk. One day you go for a long, slow walk. So there's so many ways to switch it up, and that's totally up to you. There are some safety considerations you should take before starting your own exercise program. First things first, take your medications as prescribed by your doctor or pharmacist. Do not exercise if you are ill or injured, or maybe you just need to modify the activity. If you have a small cold but you're feeling overall okay, it might be okay to do some light activity that day. If you sprained your pinky finger, I think it's probably fine to still go for that walk you were planning on doing. If you have diabetes, I highly recommend that when you're starting a new exercise program, you're measuring your blood sugars before exercise and maybe even after. Your sugars should fall within the range of 5.5 to 16.5. If you're on the lower end, consider having a snack or a meal before you begin. And if you're on the higher end, you might want to wait a little bit, make sure you took your medications as prescribed, hydrate if that's within your fluid limits. We also recommend avoiding the use of alcohol or cannabis within 2 hours of exercising and avoid heavy meals right before exercise. Another safety consideration is warming up and cooling down. You may have heard of this before, but essentially just means starting your exercise or activity session easy and slow, and then ending it the same way. We do recommend warming up for 5 to 10 minutes, and 5 minutes is generally quite appropriate, but you may want to elongate your warm up towards that 10-minute session in situations where maybe the activity is a little bit more on the intense side, so a little bit more towards somewhat hard or a higher end of moderate, or maybe if you're doing some outdoor activity where it's quite cold outside, our body requires a longer warm up for this, just like your car does when it's cold outside. We want to give our body time to send blood to where it's needed, like in the muscles of the legs, arms, and core. So doing a warm-up helps to reduce our risk of having a cardiac event, but it also helps to reduce our risk of injury. And then cooling down doesn't have to be as structured, but we do recommend that you don't go from doing a moderate intensity activity and then plopping yourself down on the sofa. Think I'm going to spend 3 to 5 minutes of light activity before I allow myself to sit. This just allows your vitals like blood pressure and heart rate to gradually return to their resting levels. This slide is just to remind you that it is okay to adjust your exercise or activity if you need to, depending on how you feel. It's 100% normal to have days where your energy is low, your motivation is low, and you're just not feeling up to what you initially had planned, whether that be completing your housework, taking the grandkids to the park, or going for a walk. It's a good idea to maybe have a plan B for these low energy days that you might come across. Or it's okay to modify or not do your activity that day. It's fine to take a rest day or maybe change your originally planned 15-minute walk to a 5-minute walk, or cleaning one room in your house instead of five. Leave room for that modification, leave space for those lazy days, and just avoid making a habit of it is what we want to do. A good way to stay engaged and motivated in your exercise plan and activity goals is to set a goal. And one way to organize those goals to make sure that you are setting yourself up for success is to use something called a SMART goal, which you may have used before. So SMART stands for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic or relevant, and time bound. So, what specific means is that the goal is well defined, it's clear, and it's not vague at all. And we'll go into this in more detail in the next slide. It's also measurable, so it's within specific criteria that measures your progress toward the accomplishment of the goal. The goal should be achievable, so it's attainable, it's not impossible, it's within reach. The goal should be realistic and relevant to your goal itself, and it should be timely. So, within a clear, defined timeline, you should be able to complete the goal. So, it's not uncommon to just set a goal and say, I'm going to do this. You should be able to say, I'm going to do this by this day or by this month. And we can adjust those as we go. So here's an example of setting a goal, and the goal might be to improve fitness or improve my fitness. So to make it specific, we might say I'm going to go for an outdoor walk after dinner with a friend. So it could just say walk, but adding specificity to the actual goal, adding descriptive words, adding a location, a time, helps to make it more achievable because then we can't just brush it aside. After dinner, maybe I've already told a friend and we're going to go outside, then we can plan accordingly. Measurable, so I'm going to do it 3 times this week for 10 minutes. So now I have a frequency, I have a duration, and now it is a measurable goal. To make it achievable, I have to think about my own fitness level. Can I achieve 10 minutes? I have to think about my own timetable. Do I have time after dinner to fit a 10-minute walk in? Is the goal realistic and relevant to improving my fitness? So, yes, I would say walking is going to help to improve my overall fitness if that's my goal. And timely, I hope to achieve this goal by Friday. So maybe I set the goal on Sunday or Saturday, and I hope to achieve it by Friday. Now, the next step is also very important. If you were successful in your goal, so if I did achieve my 3 walks this week for 10 minutes after dinner with a friend, fantastic. My goals don't end there though. I can either continue with this if I was successful and I enjoyed it and I'm not ready to change, just keep doing that. Or maybe I change it just gradually and I add 2 minutes. So now I'm going to do it 3 times a week after dinner with my friend for 12 minutes instead of 10. Maybe I change the frequency. Maybe I go to 4 times per week. Whatever is still attainable and whatever still is relevant to the goal. Now, a common outcome is that we did not achieve our goal, and that is okay. That doesn't mean you're a failure. What it means is you just need to adjust your SMART goal or make it smarter. So maybe the issue was that after dinner I was too tired, and so I changed it to before dinner. Maybe the issue was 10 minutes was just way too difficult, and I need to change it to 8 minutes. It's about looking back at each component of that goal, figuring out where you think it went wrong, adjusting it, and then trying again. Maybe I just need to make the time a little bit longer. Maybe I need to give myself more time to achieve those 3 walks. It's all going to be an individual experience, but remember, success means you can stay or make it tougher. And if you weren't successful, that's fine, just adjust it. Now I'm just going to go over some general tips for success that our team likes to provide that maybe don't fit into any of the previous slides I already went over. The first one is plan ahead. You have to take into consideration weather, your own schedule, how you might predict your energy levels will be if you know you're going to be tired after a long day's work, or if you know you're going to have a lot of energy one day because the day before you got to sleep in or something like that. I don't know. But it's always good to plan ahead, have a plan B. If weather is a component of interrupting your program, maybe make sure that you have another option that you can do indoors. Make activity dates with yourself and keep them. What I mean by this is I like to word it as book your exercise or your activity as if it were a medical appointment. We're generally pretty good at attending our medical appointments because they are important, and I think it's okay to make your activity and exercise dates with yourself just as important. They are leading to better health and fitness outcomes after all. So schedule it, especially if you're a scheduler, if you have a day planner, maybe put a reminder in your smartphone that says, don't forget to exercise 10 a.m. today or whatever it is. Plan to be active with other people. There's two reasons I like to recommend this. Number one, being social is great. It can add fun to the activity, but also it makes it so that you can depend on the other person depends on you. So you kind of have that accountability there. Make a decision to be active. So it's pretty much as simple as it is. You might just have to decide, I need to really work on my activity levels. I want to, for me, my medical professionals are maybe recommending it as well. If this is something that's important to you, you might just have to prioritize it. Celebrate every achievement. It's not uncommon. I have people in my life, whether it be at work or in my personal life, that are like, oh, but I only did this. I only made it up the stairs once. I only walked for 8 minutes and I wanted to do 20. It doesn't matter to me if you achieved a bit of activity, if you planned it, you did it, celebrate that. And you can make those celebrations fun. I have a ton of people I know of that will do their walks maybe to their favorite coffee shop so that they can have a hot drink or maybe a cold drink if it's summer to celebrate their walk there, and they get a rest and then they walk home or something like that. Or maybe you do your exercise in front of your television. It's not really a celebration, but it can add excitement to the achievement. Add a variety of activities. I mentioned this earlier to keep your program exciting. The more variety, the more interesting it is, the more fun it is, the more likely you are to keep going. Don't be afraid to try something new. Really, no harm done. And lastly, choose something fun or as fun as it possibly can be. I mentioned exercising in front of the television. There is nothing wrong with that. If that helps the time go by while you're pedaling on a bike or maybe doing some resistance training, all the power to you. If you're a headphones person, maybe you want to listen to a podcast or some music. Doing it with a friend can make it more fun. Changing location, going to a class. There's tons of ways to add excitement. And if you need just some help adding variety to your routine, do not hesitate to email us from that email I gave you at the beginning. And that brings me to the end of the presentation. Remember, if you have any questions, feel free to send an email to that email I gave at the beginning. I don't recommend commenting on the YouTube page. I don't know how often we're going to be checking this, so email is definitely best. If you're not good with email, talk to whoever your nurse is or somebody from your medical team to help you get in contact with us. Thank you so much.